Early on a seemingly ordinary day, Padre Salvi, the local curate, rose with a hint of urgency. Uncharacteristically, he celebrated Mass sooner than usual, dispelling the sins of a dozen souls in mere moments. However, as he sat down for breakfast, his mind was elsewhere. Letters, firm and sealed with wax, were strewn about the table, their contents clearly weighing heavily on him. A cook observed, "The Padre is getting sick. For days he hasn't eaten. Of the 6 dishes I placed before him, he hasn't touched even 2. Another servant, preparing a fresh cup of chocolate, replied, "He sleeps poorly. Ever since he changed his bedroom, he wakes up screaming from nightmares. Have you noticed? His eyes grow more sunken every day, and he looks even more withered and yellow." Padre Salvi was indeed a troubling sight. Collecting the second cup of chocolate, he discarded it, opting instead to pace restlessly through the spacious sala, crumpling the unread letters in his bony hands as he returned to their contents. The stress visibly consumed him. Finally, he dismissed the servants and called for his carriage, deciding to visit the woods where a picnic was planned under the fateful tree. Upon arriving at the edge of the wood, he dismissed the carriage and made his way alone. The pathway opened, revealing a challenging trail through thick thickets that led to a brook fed by warm springs from the slopes of Mount Makiling. Wildflowers decorated the banks, their names unknown to anyone but the vibrant insects flitting about. The air filled with the hum of cicadas, birdsong, and the occasional crack of falling branches, creating a serene yet haunting atmosphere. For what felt like hours, Padre Salvi wandered aimlessly, avoiding thorns and protruding tree roots that threatened to trip him. Suddenly, his gloomy contemplation was interrupted by bright, cheerful laughter wafting through the trees. He paused, heart racing, as he recognized the voice of Maria Clara ringing out above the others. "I'm going to see if I can find one of those nests," she exclaimed, her voice sweet and teasing. "I'd love to see him without him noticing me so I could follow him everywhere." From behind a large tree, Padre Salvi bent to eavesdrop. His curiosity piqued. "Does that mean you want to do with him what the curate does with you?" A giggling voice chimed in. "He watches you everywhere. Be careful. Jealousy makes people thin and gives them bags under their eyes." "Not jealousy, just pure curiosity," Maria Clara protested, laughter echoing through the tree branches. "If I were jealous, instead I'd make him invisible so no one could see him." "But if he were invisible, you wouldn't see him either. That wouldn't be nice at all. Imagine us finding the nest. We could present it to the curate, and he could keep watch over us without seeing us. How does that sound?" "I don't believe in those herons' nests," interrupted another voice. "But if I were jealous, I'd know how to keep myself hidden." The girls burst into laughter, the sound piercing the stillness of the forest, as they recalled tales from their school days. Padre Salvi, his breath quickening, gripped the tree trunk, torn between desire and the wrongness of his feelings. And just like that, they emerged from behind the bamboo thicket, their laughter fading into silence. He couldn't help himself, staring at Maria Clara, whose beauty shone, her grace amplified by the water glistening at her knees as she waded through the brook. Her hair cascaded down her back, and she wore a vibrant outfit that danced in the sunlight. She picked flowers, her friends beside her joyfully chasing after dreams of heron nests. Padre Salvi's heart raced as the sight stirred strange, forgotten sensations within him. He watched them, captivated, until they disappeared behind another thicket. Overwhelmed by the heat of his thoughts, he staggered away from his hiding place. Uncertainly, he followed the path along the brook, desperate to find clarity in the chaos of his emotions. After traversing some distance, he stumbled upon the picnic area. It was a lively scene, filled with an array of decorations, palm leaves, flowers, and streamers. The sound of laughter and chatter enveloped him. By a platform in the middle of the brook, women were exchanging jokes, while men readied themselves to bathe, creating an atmosphere alive with communal joy. Looking about, he saw Ibarra, who had organized the picnic. It was a chance for the townsfolk to celebrate and catch up, offering brief relief from their harsh daily realities. As the curate approached, he was greeted with polite nods and smiles, despite his disheveled appearance, the telltale sign of disturbed thoughts. "Where have you been, Father?" asked the alferez, glancing suspiciously at his scratched face. "Lost your way?" "Yes, I was distracted," Padre Salvi replied curtly, lowering his gaze and running a hand along his robe. The chatter continued, and drinks were served. Lemonade poured into glasses and green coconuts cracked open for refreshment, while the women engaged the curate in pleasant yet shallow conversations revolving around family and faith. His mind wandered back to Maria Clara, who had just emerged, looking radiant after bathing. "I made the last adjustments to your proposal for a school, Ibarra," the gobernadorcillo declared, joy sparking in his eyes. "Good! I look forward to seeing it come to fruition," Ibarra responded, returning the warmth with a smile. The joyous atmosphere, however, were pierced when a thin, haggard woman appeared. Her presence was unsettling, like a ghost suddenly stepping into the warmth of life. The harsh realities of the world crept back in. "Give that poor woman something to eat," cried one of the old women, who rushed to help, but paused, startled, as the woman approached the table. Recognizing her, Ibarra's face fell. "Sisa," he murmured, concern woven into his tone. "The night is dark and the boys disappear," Sisa whispered, her eyes wide with confusion. The alferez, bristling at the sight of her, stepped forward, but she grew frightened and darted away into the trees, escaping the conflict that had not yet resolved for her. "Who is she?" the alferez asked, more out of curiosity than compassion. "She's the mother of 2 sacristans," Ibarra explained, a deep frown creasing his brow. "They vanished recently, and no one knows what happened to them." His voice carried a hint of frustration, anger simmering beneath the surface. As murmurs spread through the group, pointing fingers began to draw back towards the soldiers' actions, and the tension stifled the laughter. "Your soldiers arrested her last week," Don Filippo remarked, irritation coloring his words. "They paraded her through town, and yet now we ask, who cares for her?" Waves of guilt dampened the mood as the townsfolk exchanged glances, realizing that there were many secrets yet to be unearthed. Innocent laughter turned to whispers punctuated by words like murder and disappearance. Ibarra, fueled by a mix of anger and pity, commanded, "Find that woman. I promise to help her, to uncover the truth about her sons." His voice, authoritative yet suppressing raw emotion, rang through the gathering. "Did you say she was related to your sacristans?" questioned the alferez, his full attention shifting now. Cultivated tension seemed to deepen. Each person felt the weight of muted fears and unspoken regrets. "Padre," one of the guests began hesitantly, "do you think the rumors are true? They say shots were fired when she last saw her children." Padre Salvi's lips tightened, but he silenced the murmur, his eyes darting around as he retreated from their prying gazes. It was unwise to speak candidly in a gathering, yet the truth they all sensed hung heavily in the air. The festivities slowly resumed, though the laughter was more forced and conversations subdued. A shift had occurred. The specter of sadness loomed, disrupting the joy of the day. As the afternoon wore on, Ibarra and Capitan Basilio found themselves seated at a makeshift chessboard, the game mirroring the intricate webs of politics and rivalry that encapsulated their lives. "Come, Ibarra, let's settle our 15-year-old lawsuit here and now," Capitan Basilio challenged, a playful grin on his face. "Only if it ends with a draw." "You know what they say," Ibarra chuckled, leaning forward. "If it's a draw, we both agree to drop the matter." Old men gathered around eagerly, while the young girls whispered and giggled nearby, keeping an eye on the playful competition. As the game unfolded and laughter wafted through the trees, an unexpected telegram arrived for Ibarra. He unfurled it, his eyes brightening, but it was instantly followed by a frown as he read deeper into the message. "News from the trial! It's been approved! School project approved!" he shouted, his excitement spilling over the gathering. The group erupted into cheers. Maria Clara clasped her hands, heart full of pride for Ibarra's success. "This is wonderful news!" she exclaimed. Turning to the group, Ibarra continued, "And this is my present to all of you." He handed Maria Clara half of the telegram, a gesture enveloped in hope and love. But it stood as more than just a piece of paper. It was a promise of a brighter future. "Incredible!" Maria Clara exclaimed, beaming with admiration. "What's the other part for?" asked Victoria curiously. "That is for the one who receives the worst answer," he replied with a smile, glancing towards Sinang, who was mock pouting for attention. "I get the bad one!" Sinang squealed in excitement, claiming the crumpled paper eagerly. But as the merriment swirled around them, the dense woods darkened slightly, the whispers of the past leaving their mark on the day's brightness. Suddenly, Fray Salvi approached the group of young women, distaste flickering across his features. "What's this?" It was a book, a Wheel of Fortune, sprawled before the young people, their laughter silencing at his cold tone. "Don't you know it's a sin to believe in such things?" he chastised, tearing the pages with sudden anger. Gasps and cries rang out as Maria Clara felt a pang of sadness wash over her. "You can't take away our fun like that," she exclaimed, eyes glistening. "You've likely sinned," Fray Salvi retorted, seemingly unaffected by their startled responses. He continued tearing the pages as though casting away joy itself. Albino, brimming with indignation, stood up defiantly. "Padre, that's stealing! You have no right to destroy what doesn't belong to you." The air grew thick with tension, hearts pounding and ire growing. All eyes turned toward the curate, challenging him, questioning his authority. But for once, Fray Salvi's composure wavered. Instead of responding, he stood frozen, gazing at the torn scraps of paper that fluttered to the ground. A culmination of their laughter drifted away into the air, just like the pages, lost and forgotten. "I," stammered before abruptly turning, retreating toward a carriage under the pretense of needing fresh air. "That killjoy," Sinang declared, feeling both annoyance and relief. "He has a face that says, 'Don't laugh, for I know of your sins.'" As their spirits began to lift once again after the abrupt storm, Ibarra sat back at the chessboard against Capitan Basilio. He refocused on the game, determined to recover from the distraction. Yet that initial enthusiasm had dissipated. His head swam with emotions, hope, love, and the burden of responsibility. But careless moves turned the game into a stalemate. "It's settled. We are at peace, however the trial goes," proclaimed Capitan Basilio, and the two men shared a cordial handshake. Yet the happy laughter of the earlier merriment slowly waned as shadows crept across the clearing. Patrons turned their heads at the sudden entrance of a sergeant accompanied by 4 soldiers, each armed and poised, creating a visceral sense of chaos among the women. "Everyone keep still," the sergeant barked, pointing towards the picnic. "We'll shoot anyone who moves." Despite the threat, Ibarra advanced, undeterred by the tension building in the air. "What do you want?" he demanded, his composed demeanor masking the anxiety within. "We're looking for a criminal," the sergeant spat. "Elias, the pilot from this morning." Ibarra's brows furrowed in confusion. "A criminal? You're mistaken. Elias was a part of our fiesta, purely innocent of any crime. The reports say he assaulted a priest," the sergeant accused, casting shadows over Ibarra's gathering. Agitation grew among the townsfolk as eyes darted between Ibarra and the soldiers, shifting uneasily as everyone knew the danger that lay in false accusations. With disdain, Ibarra met the sergeant's gaze. "I owe you no explanation. Our fiestas welcome all. If you had come earlier, you would have seen that even your alferez was welcomed," he challenged, turning his back defiantly. Chewing on the ends of his mustache in frustration, the sergeant ordered his soldiers to conduct a futile search, ransacking the area, yet not finding a trace of the pilot. "It fits almost every native's description," Don Filippo said to the sergeant, angering him further. "Don't make any rash movements." Eventually, after scouring the woods without success, the sergeant and his men retreated, leaving behind a sense of discomfort. Conversations resumed, albeit hushed and intermixed with concern. "Is that the same Elias who tossed the alferez into the mud hole?" Leon pondered, scratching his head thoughtfully. Curiosity piqued among the crowd. They leaned in to hear the tale. Yes, they said it was on a rainy day that the alferez tried to run the man off the path. He was stubborn, refusing to back down, and in the end, the alferez fell into the mud after being bucked from his pony, one of the townsfolk recounted. "Sounds like justice," another chimed in, laughter creeping back into the air. The heaviness began to lift. "But wasn't he also wounded?" questioned Victoria, anxiety creeping into her gaze. "No one could catch him. He was a ghost on the path," a voice added dramatically, laughter rising from the circle of people, eager to sweep the dread of the day under the table. As twilight approached, the evening sun cast shadows through the woods, hinting at the end of their joyful gathering. They left the woods behind, still talking and laughing while each step took them away from the experience of the day. But as they passed the grave of Ibarra's ancestors, there was a solemn reminder that not every tale was one of laughter. The weight of sorrow pressed on their shoulders, each giggle carrying an echo of hardship unseen. Under the fading light, their voices filled with desperation and hope that could barely mask their fears. As they made their way back to town, the sound of their voices grew quieter, bridging the gap between triumph and despair as the mystery of the evening hung in the air, leaving them with a lingering question before heading back to face the realities of life once more. They would always have that day, a moment of respite, even when masked by uncertainty. As the firelight danced and snuffed out, let us part ways with these souls, navigating the blurred boundaries of laughter and sorrow as they return to the tumult of their lives.